Thanks. Right. So you got that bit. Did you capture that? No. Right. Anyway, I've been working in product development and design for like 2 decades, and I've been working in all sorts of different companies, from big companies to agencies to working on my own. In that time, I've been working on all sorts of projects, potentially over hundreds of projects over that time. And we all used to get excited about the onboarding experience, how the user's going to come to understand the product or service we were providing. We'd get excited about the usage, make sure the quality of that usage was really good, and then we'd all walk away from it. And that would happen in the smallest teams, the biggest companies, the biggest initiatives. We would cut off halfway through the experience for the user. So I thought I'd look into this. I left my company, the last business I was at, a few years ago. I thought this was going to be a 6-week project, Medium article, maybe a conference or 2. I'm now like 3 years later. I've written a book about it. I've done 40 to 50 conferences this year. And now I'm here, and I want to tell you about endings and why they're so important in the behavior we have in consumption. So, is this going to work? The lights are going, yes? Hello? Ah, right. Most consumer experiences you can break into 3 sections. There's an onboarding period, a usage period, and an offboarding period. And if you map that onto a chart of engagement, so as consumers we start to get attracted to things through advertising, orientated through marketing, and things get packaged up for us, T's and C's, we tick boxes, and then we're into that experience. But after that, we have these periods of emotionless death where we don't really care about it. Some experiences just linger on in our houses forever, and other experiences we're not even allowed to leave. But this goes way back in history. It's not some bias from business. This is deep-rooted in our society. So if you think of yourself hundreds of years ago on a field, digging up mud or something, it's cold, you're feeling awful, you're impoverished, there's loads of disease around. Actually, your vocabulary about this subject is really deep. You know all sorts of things about death. Everyone around you dies. You're very comfortable with death. You talk about it a lot with people because it's part of life. And you basically want to get to this place because your life is so rubbish. You want to get to heaven because heaven offers. In fact, most religions offer a similar package for heaven. It's basically warm. It has abundance, and people are generally nice there. So you want to get there a lot, you know. And so you go through all sorts of mechanisms in your life. You live these rule systems around religion. One of which is funerals, and you depart life, you offboard life in a particular manner to make sure that you get into heaven, because that's where you want to get. But then in 1347, the plague arrived in Europe, decimated Europe's population. Within 3 years, it had killed 1/3 of Europe's population. Death was everywhere. To give you an anecdote of how much death was around, there was a French friar, and he used to bury 28 to 30 people in his village in France. And in the first September of the plague, he buried 680 people. And when your worldview is so wrapped up into this model of death, life, heaven, and something like that happens, everything comes unpacked. So death becomes meaningless. People are exploring in the streets, you have whole houses full of dead people. And the dominant religion at the time was the Catholic religion in Europe, and they were also mismanaging religion and taking these things called indulgences, which was sort of like a get-out-of-jail-free card for rich people. But also lots of those people who were managing religion, like the priests, were also dying, so the guidance has been lost. So you had lots of challenger religions came along, one of which was the Protestant religion. Now, in the Protestant religion, with Martin Luther, there was lots of different relationships with what we used to do in life. One was which was fasting. Now, in most organised religions, we have a period of fasting where we remove ourselves from the abundance of life for a period of time, and we reflect on how much abundance we have, and we give value to it, and we respect it. But in the Protestant religion, that was removed very early on by Martin Luther, so we didn't have any real relationship to it in the Protestant religion. Also, jobs in the Protestant religion were another thing. We used to work in the eyes of God. Good jobs in the Catholic religion way back were pope, a priest, and a nun. All other jobs were rubbish. In the Protestant religion, you could work in any job, sort of like be a developer, interaction designer. You think LinkedIn's got something to do with your career path, it's got way more to do with the Protestant religion. And you should bring that up in your next interview and see how you get on. Because it'll be... And even investment, don't throw it away. Is that actionable? It's not, is it? Don't. Whenever we have warnings and they say don't, it's not actionable. So I'm lost. As a consumer, I've no way out of that onboarding, offboarding experience. That's actually the We directive symbol. Does anyone know, haven't you heard of the We directive? So the European, no hands went up at that point, I'm not surprised. I asked this at every conference I'd done for the last year and a half. I've met about 5 people who know what the We directive is. Yeah, because consumer-facing directive from the European Union for any manufacturers, resellers, importers to offer the opportunity for the consumer to bring back electronics things into their sort of manufacturing stuff, so they can dismantle them in the manufacturing world, so we don't have to worry about them. Yeah, that sounds good, doesn't it? I didn't believe it. So I thought, I'm going to test it out. I took a 10-year-old Epson printer into PC World, and I go up to the information desk, and I said, I'm bringing this back under the We directive, thinking they're going to say, get out of here. And the guy says, oh yeah, cool. And he picks it up, and he puts it on the shelf with a load of other electronics. I was baffled. This is totally hidden. I was the total life hack, that is. But it's hidden to all of us. And even in the most exciting industry that we're all working in, we're all very passionate about digital, and we're creating these great sort of social networks, and we're getting consumers to create content, share content, create content, share content. And we don't put in adequate abilities to delete content, get that content back, dismantle that content, get rid of that content, hide that content. And it's no wonder we end up with something like revenge porn. 1 in 10 young women in the US are threatened with revenge porn. So this happens in all the landscapes we're creating consumption in. But why do emotional endings? In fact, consumers, in fact, humans love endings. We tell stories all the time. We've been telling stories for thousands of years. In films, in books, in games, everything ends up with something profound and meaningful at the end. The story is complete. And the only narrative structure that humans make is the consumer narrative that has no ending. This is Elizabeth MacArthur. She says of endings, endings in narratives attempt to preserve the moral and social order which would be threatened by endlessly airing narratives. And when I think of that and the mis-selling crisis in 2008 and the amount of people who lost their homes in that, and the endlessly airing lives they have to put up with now. This is Richard Newport, and he says, solid closure in conventional narratives and history satisfies individual and social desire for moral authority, a purposeful interpretation of life, and genuine stability. And I think of the inability that we have to turn off and end our relationship with carbon. And it's creating enormous instability. So I've been criticised over the last year or so when I've been brought out the book about what's this got to do with business? I think it's got a lot to do with business. I want to give you some examples about why businesses really need to think about endings a lot more. So, number 1, improve new business models. Historically, we had a single engagement model, which meant that as a business, I'd target a consumer, I'd acquire that consumer, they'll become a customer, and they'll be with me forever. Which I say to people like, I'm married, that ends in 2 ways, death or divorce. There's no way out of that. And if you think your customers are going to be with you forever. However, historically, you didn't need to worry about it, because this is pretty much the worldview we had. This is a very simple version of the financial services sector a good few years ago. So you'd work for 45 years, you'll have 1 employer in your life, you'll probably have 1 pension in your life, and that will take you to the grave. You might have a couple of mortgages, have a couple of houses, and before 2008, average usage usage of bank accounts in the UK were 26 years. 26 years with the same bank. How boring is that? But you know, there's not actually many endings in this because we didn't really have many products. And the problem with a single engagement model is because we're so trapped in the mindset of that, is that when endings happen, and they do happen, remember, your marriage ends two ways, ends happen to the single engagement model, and these smashes into this single engagement model, and it shards off all of these bits. And these bits are the things that pollute the digital world, the service world, and the physical world. These are waste plastic in the sea, revenge porn and lost pensions. These are the shards of broken experiences. So we need to move to a multiple engagement model. And the multiple engagement model is sort of where we're at now. In this, again, financial services, so pretty much work forever again, probably forever and ever. In the UK, pensions, 11 on average you'll have in your lifespan. Mortgages, there's a far more remortgaging market, so every 2, 3, 4, 5 years you can remortgage. And your bank accounts with fintech and stuff, we're going to have loads and loads and loads of bank accounts. And we're going to come and go from them very quickly. So we need to think about endings in that sense. So when ends happen, we can collaborate and have a conversation with consumers, and we can grab control of all of that lingering data, clean it up, and make sure people leave easily. And then have a good ending. Okay, 2, increases engagement. Kaya Cars came to market, I don't know, about 12 years ago with a thing called the 7-year warranty. Before that, everyone was buying cars on 2-year warranties, which was quality of material, so people would go, oh, doesn't my car door sound good, and stuff like that. So quality of material was like ball bearings. Nobody really cared. So 7-year warranty, everyone's like, what does that mean? Well, the interesting thing about 7-year warranty, humans find it hard to think beyond 5 years. So when somebody says, you know, that's one of the reasons you get that cliche question in job interviews and financial advisors. They go, what are you going to be doing in 5 years' time? And you'll be like, I don't know, maybe working here, maybe I'll be a millionaire, I don't know. And then, so beyond 5 years is this sort of death-like void, especially with a product relationship. So you start to think like, well, it's probably dead, isn't it? So I'm going to probably drive onto that forecourt and have this sort of funeral-like experience. Kaya Cars, when they brought this out, they were 1.3 market share around the world. They're now 3.5 market share. They put that down to the 7-year warranty. And it's people are purchasing basically a warranty above and beyond product, price, design, etc. And Snapchat do the same thing. You know, 10 years ago, or not maybe that long ago, but when Snapchat came out, people were thinking, oh, it's a bit, you know, it's for intimate relationships where they're sending pictures that they want to get rid of quite quickly. And, you know, I'm not going to use that. I'm going to be on Facebook, honest social network. And now we're all thinking, shit, I wish I started on Snapchat. Snapchat hasn't manipulated elections as far as I can know. Anyway, but Snapchat says delete is our default. Imagine saying that 10 years ago. That's what we're passionately into now. Their market share is going up as well. Okay, raises consumer satisfaction as well. Gyms are fascinating in terms of endings. So you got a turnover in gyms of 30 to 50%. That's when, after Christmas, you go, oh, I'm going to join a gym, and then you go in January and February, and spring comes along, and it's late and into the longer evenings. You think, oh, I might have a picnic on Tuesday instead of go to the gym, and you start to drop off, and then you want to leave the gym, and they say, no, you can't leave, and you're going to have to wait 2 months and pay us a real massive fee. And so this is where we're at with gyms, where they don't like us leaving. We also have that in other sectors, like pay TV sector. This is Sky in the UK. If you want to leave Sky in the UK, you have to go through a 1-hour sales interview with a professional. They're going to beat the shit out of you before you leave the party. So that's not much fun, is it? However, we're now seeing companies which are taking advantage of endings and actually putting them in the centerpiece. So what's happened in the gym market, the middle zone has totally collapsed. So there's high-end gyms that are doing this sort of specialized sort of personal trainer type experience. They're really expensive. But this low-end gym market, like Easy Gym, and this is only one of those type of companies, offering very simple relationships, and one of the cornerstones of that is simple endings. So you can come and go as much as you want, and we don't care. The ending's super simple. And Netflix do the same thing. They say, we are proud of no-hassle online cancellation. That sounds insane to anyone still on that single engagement model. Members can come and go as they please. And their market share's rocketing up as well, like 118 million. The interesting thing is that customer satisfaction about these places is so much more trusting. So Netflix is now 78% on satisfaction surveys. Pay TV is dropping and dropping, and has done for the last 10 years, down to 62%. Okay, it also preempts legislation. ENDS gets enforced a lot of the time. Legislation comes in and enforces END into sectors that just can't tolerate the idea of a multiple engagement model. So financial services in the UK, before 2008 with the crash, had 26-year, on average, bank accounts. So one of the findings was that people just really didn't like leaving. It was such a lot of hassle to leave their bank that they just wouldn't leave. So the government came in and enforced the 7-day switch, which allows consumers to switch their bank account in 7 days. Also happened in the energy sector. People didn't even know. This is a fascinating bit of thing. 56% said they had never switched supplier, did not know it was possible, or did not know if they had done so. I think if you're a sector and you've got consumers who are that disengaged with your sector, you've really got to think a lot about what you're doing. So they had an enforced ending happen. And with digital, we often sign up with all sorts of T's and C's, flippantly go through them. But when you dig into the T's and C's, it's very hard to see an amicable ending in those T's and C's. So this is the iTunes terms and conditions. Out of 20,000 words in those terms and conditions, there's 12 mentions of termination until you, as a consumer, have broken the rules, and then we're going to kick you out. Or as you have done something wrong, and we're going to kick you out. There's no amicable ending in T's and C's. You get really dark phrases like this as well. Apple reserves the right to disband the family in coordination with the termination section of this agreement. It's pretty fucked up, isn't it? So I got that and I put it on a kid's t-shirt and I get my children to wear it in the summer on the beach. And one of the reactions towards this endless lack of endings is that we have legislation by the European Union now which brings in things like GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation. And within that, as consumers, we've all been empowered to have 3 really clear, very empowering endings. And so right to have data portability allows you to sort of start pushing your data around, and then right to remove consent pretty much kills everything that they've been wanting you to do, and then right to be forgotten makes you invisible to all of that old data. So the biggest sales channels are endings, which sounds crazy, doesn't it? This is a difficult argument to think. This woman is Helen Rose Abar. She used to be a nun, and then she became a psychologist. That's not a normal career path, by the way. I think she's probably the only person who's ever done that career path. She was very interested in people becoming an ex. So you become an ex-nun, or an ex-husband, or ex-wife, or ex-fireman, or ex-policeman, or ex-robber, or blah, 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 becoming an ex. And she found that people go through a similar type of thing. What happens is there'll be an event that will create a tiny amount of doubt in your mind. And that moment of doubt, that crack of doubt, will start to be opened up. And then you'll start interrogating every other type of experience based on that piece of doubt. And that crack starts to open up. Price comparison sites do this. They get you to come in, and then you place your knowledge of your business, your service, into there, and they basically start a crack of doubt, and they start to end your current relationship. And out of that relationship, they squirrel you into a new relationship really quickly. Price comparison sites are some of the biggest sales channels in all sectors now. Utilities and phones and all sorts of sectors have this as one of their cornerstones, and it's basically an ending. Ends in jobs. This is a more recent things that I've been looking into. A lot of people ask me about this, and this is only a little section of it. But I find this guy's really interesting. Reid Hoffman, he's started LinkedIn, and he says that acknowledging that your employees might leave is how you build the relationship that convinces great people to stay. I think this is a really interesting angle on jobs, especially after what Helen was saying about how we need to rethink our mindset around jobs. I used to work for this big corporation years ago, and I used to have phrases like this would be bandied around in meetings. Really mind-blowingly boring meetings where people would just have these flippant phrases. I was such a low ebb about my relationship with my job. Where am I actually adding any value at all to this? I thought the only thing I'm actually adding is I'm taking money from this big corporation and I go and spend it in the local community. That's basically how low I got. So out of this, and especially with the endings thing, I've recently created like a game that you can play in these really awful meetings called Could Workbot Work? And you know on those calls where you're like, you've got all these cliches and stuff, and you're on this cliche work call, and you say these mindless things, and nobody actually cares what you're listening to. So I created loads of cards. Depending on how many cards you get through of these mindless phrases, will indicate to you whether your job's ending, whether through automation or something. So if you only get through, let's say, 5 cards, then you're probably pretty safe and people are listening to what you've got to say. But if you say, let's say 40, 50 potentially, cliche phrases of these cards, you really should leave. So these are the top, they're in 7 categories. So you sort of, they're in different categories of, so appear technically challenged. This is an easy one to get through. Put that card down, easy peasy, beginning the meeting. Why haven't you said that every meeting, haven't you? You can appear in person. Who's on the call? You can say these at any point and play this game. And depending on how many cards you get through in the game, your job's ending. Okay, what would a good closure experience be? After doing loads of this stuff, I'm going to give you some examples. It's consciously connected to the rest of the experience through emotional triggers that are actionable by the user in a timely manner. Let's put those into a bit of context, a bit more detail around that. Consciously connected, what does that mean? This is Epsom's Paper Lab. It's a paper pulping solution for your office, not your home office. This is probably a massive legal firm. You put in paper one end and it print out new paper the other end. Does 14 sheets per minute. It's actually a pretty reasonable pace that can go at. And it's very environmentally sound, because our experience of ending, whether it be a recyclable ending or a secure shredding ending or like I don't give a fuck ending, you chuck paper in the bin and it goes off, picked up by a truck, goes to a pulping station, then gets chucked into reams again. It's the same experience. You don't see it or experience it. This is death and life rebirthed right in front of you. It's a great ending. While you're drinking coffee, you can watch that secure shredding happening right there. Emotional triggers. This is Marie Kondo. Has anyone read her book? Yeah, a few people. It's actually really fascinating. She's quite insane, but she's got some great things to say, and it's quite Buddhist, Shinto religion. So what she says to people is like, she's a declutterer from Japan. So she goes into houses, people's houses, and she declutters their house. So she gets out all of your coats and your shoes and your books, and she's put them into piles, and you've got to pick up each one, and you've got to say, does it bring me joy? And saying that, does it really bring me joy? And if it does, you can keep it. But if it doesn't, you have to put it into the pile to be disposed of. And then you go to that pile and you pick up each one. And he has to say, thank you, clicker, for allowing me to go through a presentation and point with a laser, which my kids actually only use, I don't use it. And thank you for your time. And now I'm going to put you into the right place and say goodbye to you. And you thank it. That sounds insane, doesn't it? We're always saying hello to things meaningfully. We never put any goodbyes in, which give thanks and reflect and benefit. Spotify, good thing. When you leave their premium service, they send you a playlist which sort of eggs you on. It has things like, I want you back, don't leave me this way, if I can't have you. And it's not a hard resell, but it's great. It emotionally triggers you to raise the relationship. It's upbeat and it's lifting. Okay, so this is actionable. So insurance companies usually work on blanket insurance, which is a 1-year house insurance or 2-week holiday insurance, etc., etc. But it doesn't manipulate any risk based on behaviour. So Trove have come to market and they realise that things like cameras, for example, is at low risk in your house. And when you leave your house with your camera and you trip over and you're on rocks and stuff, it becomes a high-risk product. So you can change that relationship in the app, and then when you come back, you drop that risk again into that low-risk thing. That's really good. Trim have come to market. So US-based firm, they dig into your banking things and then they recognise all of the little subscriptions you're chucking out of your bank account, and then they end those relationships. And this is what the future's going to be, is like companies that end relationships. Timely. Historically, companies really didn't like it when we returned things. It would be really difficult for them. But more recently, with the internet, we've had to start to grapple with that. And companies now are seeing that as a great opportunity to embed trust in the relationship. Returns are enormous. When there's a day in January, the first working day of the year, is the biggest returns day of the year. It's the biggest post office day, which get all their returns back. And it's quite crippling for the post office. But returns is an amazing achievement and a great ending. Another thing we used to do when you used to buy a flight is you'd have that little box which said, I want to make this flight carbon neutral. And it would allow you to offset the carbon that you're going to chuck in the atmosphere by your flight. But it was a great ending experience because it gave you that little bit of ability, that actionable ability as a consumer, just to reflect and do something about the damage that you were going to do. What we've done now as providers is just tuck that under the corporate social responsibility handle and hidden it away from the consumer. In my mind, this is the wrong way we're going to deal with climate change because we need to expose the consumer to stuff. Okay, 6 things you can do at work tomorrow. You can think about ends. Hopefully this has given you a bit of food for thought. Think about endings. And some of you can talk about ends. If you've come here with a colleague, you're probably going to go, oh yeah, that's going to be interesting, bring it up at work. If you're on your own, you're screwed because you're going to go back to work and people are going to go, hey, we should do about an offboarding experience or an ending to the consumer experience. And everyone's going to go, shut up. Can audit ends. I go into places and I say to companies, have you actually got an ending? And they're like, a what? Have you got, have you consciously thought about your ending as your consumer experience? And so many companies haven't thought once about it. You can map endings, which I'm doing loads of these exercises tomorrow. So if you've signed up for the course tomorrow, we're going to go through all sorts of activities around this. So mapping endings based on film narrative, actually. The narrative structure is a really good place to start putting your consumer experience and start arcing that as you onboard and offboard into film. We talked about that a minute ago. And I think I often suggest to companies, if you think about 5% of your project time considered for 5 years out, and if you're building tech, 5 years out is death to your products. So that'll start make you thinking about endings a lot. And now I might have done the most ridiculous thing anyone's ever done. I've started a business which is the world's first customer ending business. Can you imagine how hard that's going to be to sell? I'm going to go to companies and I'm going to say, you should start doing really good endings to your customer experiences. But actually it's going all right. So I've been speaking to these people that they're listening. I haven't built any endings yet for anyone, but businesses start to go, we want to hear more. And that is the end, and that's the book. And it's on Amazon, Smashwords and iBooks. Thank you very much, and thanks for waiting as well.